everybody. It's Robin Riley for Bello's Designs. Welcome to my Talk Crafty to Me video tutorial. This tutorial I am calling the double stencil technique. I want to show you another way to use your stencils to get a different result for your card toppers. Before we get started on the supplies that I used here on this card, I want to invite you to join in on our Facebook groups. We have 2 pages, Del Bello's Design Lounge, where we showcase all of the Lavinia products that we have. You'll see some great creative projects there. In the Del Bello Design a la carte page is where we showcase all the other items that are currently in the store. Join us in both of those groups and share your creations, make new friends, and get to know some of us. We are also on other social media platforms like Instagram, Pinterest, and TikTok. There, all you need to do is search the hashtag Del Bello's Designs, and you'll get some more videos for inspiration. All right, let's look at the different supplies that I used to create this card. First of all, I used for this card the multifarious Smooth and Supreme card. This is the A5 size. I absolutely love this cardstock. It's super smooth, it's super strong, and if you've been following along, you know what is important to me is more so not the weight, but the GSM. And as you can see, this is 330 GSM, which I know means to me that it can withstand and hold a lot of moisture. Now, for this card, I prepped my piece ahead of time so that you didn't have to wait. I used a piece of that A5 card. I covered it heavily in the new Lavinia acrylic spray called Chartreuse. Awesome product. I cannot recommend this enough for a quick and easy background. The color is extremely vibrant. And being that I used the multifarious card, it went on very smoothly, dried rather quickly, and gives just an awesome result. This measures 5.5 by 5.5 inch square. Again, like I said, I did this previously to save time and you didn't have to watch it, but simply all you do is spray the ink on. I did add a little bit of water because I wanted to get some sort of a veining, a running of the paint, just to make this a little bit of a funkier design. Also, what I used, and what is really necessary if you use Sweet Poppy stencils, is a magnetic board. Now, this magnetic board I made myself. It's years old. This is something, though, that can be purchased in Patty's store, and I will supply that link. Now, the reason I'm using the magnetic board is because the Sweet Poppy dies that I'm using are metal, and they stick so nicely to the magnetic board, and it just makes working with stencils so much easier. So the one stencil that I will be using from Sweet Poppy is the Aperture Full Heart. I will also be using the Sweet Poppy Black Daisy. And the other Sweet Poppy stencil that I am going to be using is called Peace, Love, and Blessings. And why I particularly like this set of words is that you can tape off and only use one word at a time if you don't want to use all of the entire stencil. The other stencil that I'm going to be using is from Lavinia. This is the Feather Leaf stencil. The inks that I'm going to be using, other than the acrylic spray ink, I'm using Distress ink in Prize Ribbon. If you do not have the Distress ink, you could use the Distress Oxide. I will also be using VersaFine Clair in Nocturne. I will be applying those inks with brushes, and you can use any tool of your liking for applying inks. You will also need Sweet Poppy low-tack tape, which is something I will always and forever have in my stash. I will use at the end a black marker. I will be using a white Uniball Signo pen for some highlights. Always water on hand for cleaning up stencils along with some type of a cloth. And I believe that's it. So why don't we get started? All right, let me grab my paper. Now, all right, I'm going to simply place my card onto the magnetic table or plate that I have here. Then I'm going to lay my feather leaf stencil from Lavinia, and using the heart, the full heart stencil, I'm going to align my card with the stencil. Let me just scoot that up a tad bit. Okay, now as you can see already, double stencil. Now you understand the double stencil technique. What's fun about using the Sweet Poppy stencil is it holds my Lavinia stencil in place. So that's really nice. And using an aperture stencil gives me a lot of room. Keep in mind, though, that you could use any two types of stencils. I find for this particular technique, using an aperture stencil along with a stencil that has more intricate detail to be much easier, especially when you're trying this for your very first time. So let's start with that distress ink. Remember, that's in the prize ribbon and the brush. I'm going to ink this up rather generally. I'm going to tap off some of the excess. I am not going for a smooth look by any means, so I am just going to apply all through the stencil. It does not matter to me if it is blotchy. Now, I am going to try to keep this a little bit lighter on the left side because I am going to apply another stencil there. It'll just make it easier for some coverage. Grabbing a little more ink here. I want to make it a little darker here and there. Now, something to keep in mind when you are using the Sweet Poppy stencils, or any magnetic stencil for that, the price point of these is a little bit higher, so I always really take care of these. So I did pretty well. I didn't get much ink on that at all. But if I weren't on a video, I would take this immediately and put it in a sink with some warm soapy water to wash it. But for time's sake, I'm just going to rub off the ink to keep the stencil nice and clean. Just get into that habit of cleaning your stencils immediately. It pays off in the end. And then removing the Lavinia stencil, you can see I have a nice outline of the double stencil. And again, same thing with the Mylar stencils that you own. Get in the habit of cleaning them off immediately. Yes, you will have some staining, which we all know it does not affect how the stencils work, but it's just nice to always start a project with a clean stencil. All right, the next step to this is I'm going to add the Black Daisy stencil. And that is what it's called, Black Daisy. Yes, I am using black ink, but that is what it's called also. So I'm just going to place that on the side here. And again, being that I'm working on a magnetic sheet, it really helps hold everything in place. Notice that I have an edge extremely close to where I'm going to be stenciling. Not so much here on this side, but I don't trust myself. So that's where the Sweet Poppy stencil comes into play. The Sweet Poppy low-tech tape comes into play. Geez, sorry about that. I'm just going to block off this area so that I don't have any stray ink come onto my card. Using the VersaFine Clair Nocturne, I'm going to apply a layer of the black ink. Now, my pad is a little bit juicy here, so I'm going to take extra precaution and dab off some of the extra ink. Even though this is magnetic and it is sealed rather tightly to the card, if you have too much ink onto any brush you're using, or if you're using a smoothie, whatever it be, it can still leak under. So be careful with that. Always start out with a light coating, and I'm just stippling here. I'm not pushing. I have found that if I push hard, then I have a chance that the ink will leak under this stencil. Even though it feels as if it's adhered rather tightly, you can still get that under there very easily. Rule of thumb for me is always to apply a light coat first and then add more light coats on top until you get the desired darkness of the ink that you were going for. Okay, now I could stop there if that's the look that I am looking for, but I do want it to be a little bit darker. So I'm going to go ahead and apply a second layer of ink. Now, being that I am using the VersaFine Clair here, the first stencil that I used, you saw that I used a distressed ink, and that ink came off of the stencil very easily. With the VersaFine Clair, or any ink that would be similar to that type of ink, you really need to make sure you clean your stencil well. Again, if I were not doing a video, I would immediately stand up and put this into a sink of nice soapy water to clean my stencil. It's best when using the Sweet Poppy stencils, especially something that has fine detail. Not so much the heart, but anything that has the fine detail. It's really best if you use an old toothbrush to clean it, because there are some really sharp areas. Ask me how I know. They cut. And you don't want to take and bend your stencil either. And ask me how I know that too. I have done it. So, you know, heed the warning and use a nice old toothbrush to clean off these stencils. All right, I hope that's going to be enough. Going to remove the tape. Lift my stencil, and yes, that's exactly what I wanted. Now I'm going to quickly clean off the stencil just using the water that I have on my dirty old cloth here. And don't do as I am doing here. Remember what I said, use a toothbrush, which I will do that after I'm done videoing this. I will go back and redo this, but that at least saves it from a lot of that ink sticking onto the metal. All right, so there we have a pretty nice design with that. Okay, now to add the words, again, this is where my most favorite tape comes into play. I just want to add the word peace to this card, and I'm going to place it in the area that I want it, and hoping, and I'm just using the margins on the card to make sure that I have this straight. I am going to tape off the areas where I'm afraid my brush could very easily sneak out and hit my card. And just to be safe, even though I'm probably safe without doing it, I am going to cover the word love, just in case I would have some bleeding. Using the VersaFine Clair Nocturne Black again in my same brush, I'm going to come in and just dab easily the first layer. Oh yes, you see me, I do switch my hands. I am a tad bit ambidextrous. Guess I'm lucky in that way. Let me get some more color down there. Okay, be patient as you do this. Granted, you are going to take your time. I'm trying for the sake of the video Not to bore you, go slow. Slow is always better. Adding layers a tad bit at a time is always better also. Okay, I think that should do it. Let me remove my tape, clean my stencil quickly. Yeah, there we go. Looks pretty good. All right, let me get that to the side. Now, all I'm going to do is add some finishing touches. One being I'm going to use my Uniball Signo pen. I'm going to hope that this is dry enough and I don't get any bleeding through. If I do get some bleeding through using the white, meaning that the white would possibly turn gray on me, all I'd have to do is trace over top of it. Let's hope that it's dry enough that I can get started. I'm just going to highlight a few areas. Sure I am. There we go. Scribble off. I'm going to highlight a few areas of each of the flowers. When you're working and tracing, or anytime you're doing your artwork, you should always bring your artwork to you. Okay, as you can see, I'm left-handed when I use a pen. I don't want my wrist to be rubbing over. So when I say bring my artwork to me, I bring it closer to the hand that I'm using so that I'm not dragging this part of my hand through the ink, creating possible smudge marks. So I will just continue to rotate around. And once I start on a side of the petal, I remain on that same side the entire time around the petal. I do not flip-flop. It's one of my quirks, but I just feel it looks better. It's more consistent that way. Again, with the leaves staying on the same side of the petal, or the leaf itself. I will continue on this petal, just adding highlights here and there. Now, I just got a brand new white Signo pen, so it is flowing super nice. No struggles whatsoever. Oh, I just did a no-no. That's okay. I'm going to let that go. A no-no to me. Most people probably would not pick up on that, but I went on the wrong side of the petal. That will drive me insane. I'm going to show you how to fix that here in a minute. Let's let it dry. As I was saying, a new Signo is nice because it runs so smoothly and the ink is flowing nicely. But what I have found, and what I really like, is when they get older, that they start skipping a little bit on me. And I actually like that. I like that look. It almost looks as if I planned for the ink to skip. Here I am making a few skip marks just by lifting my pen off of the design itself. But as the pen gets older, ooh, I love when that happens. Crazy, I know. Silly too. Okay, let's go back and let me show you how I'm going to fix that mistake that will literally drive me insane. I'm going to take a black marker, and I have found that the Bic marker, also the Sharpies, the black matches the VersaFine Clair really well. So I'm just going to gently dab the ink around that little mark that I made. I have to let that dry for sure. So let's give that a couple seconds. Now, you and I know that mistake was there, but the recipient of this card in no way will know that that's there. So let me get this going on the right side. Oh, got to scribble to get it going sometimes. Okay. There we go. There, now I feel better. The OCD in me could not manage that. Sorry. Okay, last thing is to create my frame around my card. And to do that, what I'm going to do is simply take a scrap piece of paper. As you can see, I use the same one over and over. I am going to align the edge of another scrap piece of paper to the edge. And I'm going to take my black marker and slowly draw along the edge of the card And what that's going to do is it is going to leave a very fine black line on the edge. So being that this card is definitely larger than what I typically make, being that it's 5.5 by 5.5, it's going to go atop of a 6-inch card base. Again, larger than what I typically would be making. So not only will this cost me more to mail because of the size, but also the weight sometimes can be the issue for cost. So instead of layering this with another piece of card, say a black, for example, to make the black frame, drawing the frame around will save a little bit on the weight and the size of the card that you're creating. So let me just finish this last tracing and show you the finished product. So here we are. A nice way to make those aperture stencils pop is using a second stencil underneath it. So aperture stencils are those ones that are just great big cutouts with no details. There's circles, triangles, squares. There's all different shapes of apertures. And I remember the first time I got them, I thought, what in the world am I going to do with something so large, you know? And I was always stamping on the inside of the aperture. And it was just kind of a blah effect. And then when I learned this technique, I thought, oh, this gave whole new life to all of my apertures. I can really change the appearance of this heart every time I want to use it by adding just another stencil on top. So here, you can take a peek at the first one I created. And then here's the second one I created. I hope you learned something new from this. I hope this gives you another idea as to how you can use your stencils and be a little more creative with them. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I really appreciate you taking the time to do so and commenting. We'll see you again in the next one. Bye-bye.